Good afternoon, everybody. I think we can make a start as it's exactly 2 o'clock and we're all here. I'd like to begin by welcoming both committee members to this meeting of the Audit and Accounts Committee at Newshire Hall on Thursday, the 28th of March, 2024. I'm getting a bit of an echo. Is Albert's getting an echo as well? I don't know whether there's... It's okay over there. Is it also a bit odd for you as well?
This microphone chair coming through the speakers.
Let me carry on. Oh, that seems a bit better. Anyway, that's fine. And so welcome everybody to the meeting, and particularly welcome all those people who are watching the live stream on YouTube. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and use social media during the meeting. Can I ask that everyone present turns their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place? Please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and that a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the County Council's website. There's no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, please leave by the nearest marked fire exit, which is through the middle doors on my left, and assemble in the car park. Just before we start, I'd just like to welcome the various officers who have joined us today. So Michael Hudson, who's the Executive Director for Finance and Resources, is here and will be with us for the whole meeting. Tom Kelly and Ali Todd are also in the room and are welcome to join us for their particular items and add on to any others as they see fit. And then joining us on Zoom, we can all see Sarah Brown, who's partner of KPMG. Welcome, Sarah, from Birmingham this afternoon, I think. And
yes.
Emma Duncan, Director of Legal and Governance at the County Council. And then we're also expecting Mairead Claydon, Mairead, who is Head of Internal Audit. So those three ladies are all joining us for Zoom, but just assume that they're in the room for the purposes of asking questions and dealing with matters as normal. Dawn, do we have any apologies?
Apologies from Mohammed Hussain and also from Stephen Moyer.
Alan?
Just as I've mentioned before, I'm chairing a Finance and Assets Committee at ECDC at 4:30, so I'll be leaving early, unless we finish on time.
Well, that's entirely in your hands. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or non-statutory disclosable interests? No. Moving on to the next item, members were being asked to approve the minutes of the last meeting on the 6th of February 2024 as an accurate record. If any committee member wants to raise a question on the accuracy of the minutes only, can they do so now? I see no objection, so we'll we'll take that as carried unanimously, and I will sign the minutes for Dawn later on. We move on to the action log, and you all have a copy of the updated action log. Do members have any questions or comments? Chris.
Thank you, Graham. A couple. The first is to do with the minutes of the 28th of September 2023, which is minute 140. And this, it goes back 6 months now, was where we found out when we were talking about VAT reconciliations and the problems there were with that there were other debtor balances and that they related to an isolated historic issue relating to the IT systems transfer. And it was agreed that we would have a section on this in a future report. And what we have as the new completion is that sufficient progress has been made in this area to enable an audit opinion on 2021 accounts, and that, and I'll quote it here because I didn't fully understand it, we have ongoing attention to balance reconciliation as part of the continuous improvement of year-end procedures. That implies to me that although the auditors have been satisfied that there's no material misstatement of the accounts involved with this, and of course there has to be quite a significant risk in order for there to be a significant material misstatement, the fact that we have ongoing attention to the balance reconciliation suggests to me that that problem still hasn't been sorted out. Now, if that is the case, this shouldn't be completed as an action, but we should still have a report at some stage on this if those balances, which the imbalances which occurred as a result of that IT system transfer, still haven't been sorted out.
Thank you, Tom.
Yes, Chair. I think Councillor Bowden is quite right about that. Both on the fact that we have made progress in order to get sign off, or very close to sign off for the 21-22 year, but I think we do need to reopen that action and include the update to committee as requested. So we will do that.
So we'll change the action log to reflect that. Any other comments? Go on, Chris.
My second one is for the minutes of the 6th of February, the last meeting, and it is the fourth item down on in minute 159, which was the internal audit report, I believe. So the fourth one down, which was, and I'll quote what it says here, to provide a deep dive on some essential and high-risk actions in future, potentially linking it to the annual governance statement. What is quite key to what was suggested, and it's in the minutes, is that this related to those essential and high-risk actions which have been highlighted by internal audit, which were overdue by more than 3 months. And I wonder if those words after future, which are more than 3 months overdue, could be added, so that we can see that that the request was to look at particularly things which were sticking as being overdue, even though they were deemed by internal audit to be essential and high risk.
I think that's a good idea. Do you want to comment or just say yes, we agree?
Through you, Chair, yes, I agree we can do that, and we'll also do the update. Mairead does pick up in her report later on in the agenda some of the update in this, and obviously the annual governance statement, which will come to the next committee, will pick this up. So,
and just on that page, whilst we're on it, there are various boxes, and the right-hand column it isn't complete. A lot of the stuff must be in progress, and it'll be useful just to demonstrate for the committee that Stephen Meyer, for instance, is following up with HR the issue of potential disciplinary actions where appropriate for individuals who resign. Sorry, Dawn.
Chair, over the last few days, I sent out an update for the, I think it's not the 4th and 5th ones, the ones for Stephen. On the action log, there were some updates that I circulated by email to the action log.
Okay, thank you. I missed that, but I will now look for it. Any other comments from anybody? No, thank you very much. So apart from the comments which Chris has raised, we note the updated action log and the comments which Dawn has circulated recently. Thank you. On to item 3, we have no petitions or public questions. So we move on to item 4, which is the financial reporting and related matters report. Can I ask Tom Kelly, Service Director, Finance and Procurement, to introduce this report? Tom.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just deal briefly with the historic and national matters before passing on to Ellie to talk about the accounting policy section of this report. So just to confirm, in writing the verbal update we gave last time around BDO's determination of the objections from 2017 and 2018, the additional update since the last committee is that the appeal period on those has now expired. So those matters are now completely closed in terms of the audit certificates being received. and we are in liaison with BDO about the their proposed audit fees for those matters. In terms of paragraph 2.1.2, we're now expecting the opinion from EY on our 21-22 accounts to come forward in the week commencing the 8th of April. From the council's perspective, we've responded to all queries and provided an updated set of accounts reflecting the adjusted and unadjusted items that the committee saw last time. So I think we are complete from our perspective on that. And similarly with EY in relation to 22-23, we are expecting that the disclaimer opinion will come forward on that year. So they have written to us confirming the work they are intending to complete, predominantly on going concern, value for money, and pensions. And then subject to national legislation that we would have a disclaimed opinion, as Mark Hodgson explained to the committee last time for the 22-23 year. That relates to the update we give later on in the report about the national consultation. It's been, as expected, the consultations from the NAO, from DLUC and from SIPFA. We have made a reply to the DLUC consultation, and in particular the dates for publication of local authority accounts, continuing the draft accounts continue to be due by May. And then the last thing I was going to say is the 23-24 work is in progress with KPMG. So, for instance, a number of walkthroughs and initial information requests have been responded to. So that seems to be progressing well at the moment, ready for the commencement of the full audit in the summer. And then Ellie.
Just before we move on, can we just pick up questions for Tom, Ellie, and then we'll deal with the accounting policies. So any comments, questions on the historic audits and the ones which are going on at the moment? Chris?
It's in that section of the report, but it does have historic potential implications. It is to do with the preparation for IFRS 16 on leases. Is it appropriate for me to ask that now?
Were you going to cover leases? We'll cover leases shortly.
Okay.
If I can just ask a question about the national consultation, presumably we've heard nothing yet from government or anybody else about what the words around it, the disclaimed accounts might be, and how common that's going to be across local authorities.
Yes, as far as I'm aware, there's been no confirmation of that as yet, and you'll see in 2.74 that's the one of the issues we've made representations on, because there is uncertainty about how some of that opening balances work will actually happen in practice, and the wording, and as Mark Hodgson flagged last time, the impact of disclaimer will have this sort of tail effect over 2 or 3 years to probably modify the opinion in some way for that period. So yeah, progress to see the consultations, but still a complex and uncertain part of the picture.
Sarah, can I put you on the spot here? Are you happy with the progress that you're making with the assistant of officers for the 23-24 accounts? Sarah, are you still online? Perhaps we'll assume she's not. Anyway, we'll move on. We might come back to that question.
Yeah.
Oh, hello, Sarah. Are you still there? Can you hear anything? I think that hands up means she's happy. But if you're not happy, Sarah, put a thumbs down. Well, I was planning to come back to you about the internal audit plan. So you can sort of think about whether you've got. Oh, go on, Sarah.
Sorry, I dipped out. Can you hear me?
You're very garbled, but we can just about hear you. Do you want to try? I think we're going to have to leave you for a bit, Sarah, and perhaps come back to you. Okay, let's move on. So I think we're now on to your bit, Ellie, and the leases arrangements and the other accounting policies.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So yeah, the two remaining bits that Tom hasn't mentioned relate to the 2023-24 accounts. The first is accounting policies. Every year we review our accounting policies and make any amendments or suggest any amendments that we believe are needed in relation to either changes to the code or in line with best practice. This year we don't actually have any recommendations for change. So whilst we normally would bring those changes if they were into this committee, this year we're just asking for your approval to stick with the existing policies that are found in Appendix A of this report. The second area is in relation to the introduction of a new international financial reporting standard in relation to leases. This has been introduced into the private sector recently, well, several years ago, and more recently the NHS, and it is now the term for all local authorities. The implementation of this is from 2024-25, so that will be from Monday onwards. But in terms of the impact, there's also an impact on the 23-24 accounts because we need to disclose our estimated the estimated impact of the transition arrangements in those accounts. So that is the work that the team are currently undertaking at the moment. We're doing a data gathering exercise to try and pull that information together to produce those figures. And then over the coming year, we will be doing a much more targeted and detailed piece of work to pull all of that information together. It is quite a complex area of work, not necessarily to do with the accounting calculations that are required, but just because it involves gathering a large set of data across the entire council and schools. And then within a lot of that data that we need is actually buried deep within contract documentation. So it's trying to pull all of that information out, which is what makes it complex. Yes, I think that was all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. Let's Chris ask his question, then Jeff.
I'll start with the second first, and I'll come back to the first point second, if we may, the accounting policies. On the IFRS 16, I see that it's stated that work is underway on this. Have we yet got any feel at all for the quantum which is involved here of what will have to be deemed to have been capital items rather than revenue items? And clearly, this will have an impact on the capital financing requirement. Am I correct in assuming that we will have to charge MRP, not merely in the current year, but in previous years as well, since the start of the so-called lease, and that we would be reversing out any charges that may have been made for interest, which might have gone to the revenue account? I'm just not quite clear what the process is and what the potential impact may be on the accounts for 24-25. Whilst I fully appreciate the 23-24 is merely for comparison purposes for the next year, I'm quite unable to calculate if this is going to have a significant effect or not.
Just before you answer that, Ellie, Jeff, is your question related to leases? And
it's related to it, but it's just a very simple question of that. Sorry, just a comparatively simple question, probably very simple because I don't understand it. Is the IFRS 16 going to change the policy on PFI accounting? Does that impact on it? Because I think what we've ever done before seems to make sense as it is. So I don't know. Just that was the question.
Okay, I'll try and remember those. So in terms of the impact on MRP that you were talking about, I think maybe it would be worth bringing back a more a slightly more comprehensive briefing note on this. But my understanding is that the financing for those leases will come with it. So there will be no impact on the revenue position, but obviously we will be bringing those assets and liabilities onto the balance sheet. But I will come back with a more detailed briefing note on that. What your first question was, the quantum. So in terms of the quantum, we're in the middle of that data gathering exercise at the moment. So again, maybe that's something that I could come back to you on. I think we've had something like a 50% return rate at the moment. So we've got quite a long way to go in terms of gathering that information. We haven't come across a significant number of leases. Having said that, some of the within the data that we've asked for, but having said that, some of the significant areas that we know that we do need to look at, like property, for example, aren't in that 50%. So that is going to increase the numbers quite significantly when we get that return back. So that was those two questions. In terms of the PFI, my understanding is that there is an impact on the PFI because we do need to do a revaluation exercise on it, but I don't believe it fundamentally changes the accounting. Yeah.
Can I just ask a related question? Are you going to have to do this every year?
Yes, we are.
Regularly?
Yes.
So is there going to be some form of data automation on all of this?
Yes, we are also, that's part of what we are looking into. At the moment, we are looking into using our Concerto property asset database to hold some of this information. And but that is not a specific IFRS 16 kind of account or software package. So that is something that we will looking to potentially purchase in future.
Okay, thank you. Go on. Sorry, Sarah, were you trying to get back in?
Oh, no,
Oh, I see. I'll just ask Sarah another question about the accounting policies in just a moment. So if we just deal with them within the committee, and then I'll ask Sarah. So Chris, you got a question about the accounting policies?
Yeah, it's a really simple one, but I'm actually not sure what the answer is. In our page, bottom of page 14 of 25, or top of page 15 on this section, it's about the revenue accounts being debited with various amounts to record the real cost of holding long-term assets during the year. And the second bullet point at the top of page 15 is the revaluation and impairment losses on assets used by the service where there are no accumulated gains in the revaluation reserve against which they can be written off. Are those accumulated gains ones which are directly related to whatever has suffered a revaluation or impairment loss, or is it generally any accumulated gain which may be utilized to net off the revaluation or impairment loss?
Sorry, I'm just trying to find this page, the top of page 15.
Page 15, charges to revenue for long-term assets.
Chris, well, I think we may be on page 27 on our pack. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, it isn't.
Okay, well, but try 27.
Sorry, can you repeat the question now? I found it.
If you, we're talking about debiting revenue accounts for various reasons, charges for long-term assets. And the second reason which is given is charge for revaluation and impairment losses on assets used by the service, but only where there are no accumulated gains in the revaluation reserve against which they can be written off. Would those accumulated gains, because it's not specific here, be related directly to the revaluation loss or the impairment loss, or would they be more general and be utilized if there are any accumulated gains at all? They could be utilized for the to net off against the revaluation loss or the impairment loss.
It's specific to that asset. So if there is an asset that's previously had a revaluation gain, we can net it off against that, but not against any other revaluation gain for a different asset.
Do you think it might be helpful just to specify that it should be directly related?
Yes, we can do that. Yeah, thanks.
Any other comments? No. So Sarah, can I ask you a couple of questions? One, the original question, are you happy with how things are going with the 22, 23, which 23, 24 accounts? That is all progressing. And then secondly, do all these asset accounting policies make sense to you, and do you think that they're a fair reflection to what a good local authority should be adopting?
Yeah, so I think apologies firstly, I technically went out and came back in and it now seems to be working. In answer to your first question, then yes, I think just to give an update, on Monday this week, we met with Jacob and Mark from EY just to work through mutual expectations, and everything that Tom said is in line with our understanding, that we're expecting the 2022 accounts and VFM to be concluded very shortly, and that we've agreed with EY that it will be that file that we will undertake our review over, because that will be the latest full audit of both the financial statements and value for money. For FY23, our understanding is that that will be disclaimed. When that would be disclaimed is yet to be determined. We expect it will be at some point between June and September, but we would very much like to be able to get on with the substantive work for FY24 and not necessarily have to wait for that disclaimer. So we're just working through that with the National Audit Office and the FRC and our own internal risk processes to make sure that the disclaimed opinion timing won't delay when we can get on and commence our more substantive audit work. So that's a little bit uncertain, and we'll continue to report back to this committee once we've got a firmer view. But in terms of all of our work around risk assessment and planning, then yes, it's progressing well. There's still a bit to do, but we are, where we'd expect to be, I think it's fair to say at this point in time. If that answers your first question.
Yep, that's very helpful. Thank you.
And then in terms of the second point around accounting policies, yeah, we obviously had an opportunity to have a look through the paper before this committee, and it covers everything we would expect it to cover, with IFRS 16 obviously being a new area of focus. We will, as part of our both review of the prior year EY files as well as our more thorough review of the accounting policies, work through this in some detail to make sure that it complies with, I guess, our own KPMG interpretation of the standards. But I think it's fair to say that you already follow a very prescribed set of rules, not only under IFRS, but also the other various guidance notes that you're expected to follow, and it's very standardized across local authorities. So there's nothing in there that looks unusual or out of line with what we'd expect to see.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. That's both answers very reassuring. And no comments from anybody? No. All right, thank you very much. So we've noted the report, and with the one minor tweak, we've agreed to the council's accounting policies for the 2023-24 statements of account as attached in Appendix A. Thank you, Ali. Next item is the draft internal audit plan for 2024-25. Can I ask Mairead Claydon, Head of Internal Audit and Risk Management, to introduce this report? Mairead.
Thank you, Chair. So this report brings you the draft internal audit plan for 2024 to 25. It's important to note that we do operate a flexible audit plan, so we expect this will change in year as the risk environment changes. However, every year we like to do a major kind of review, restatement of the plan ready for the new financial year. The plan itself is not a huge departure from previous years. There is some extra time in the core plan, which reflects a few things, such as we have a larger number of grants this year, which internal audit will be required to sign off. And we also are needing to double up time for the debt recovery audit, which we'll cover later in the progress reports. Table 1 and Table 2 in the report are key for this committee to consider, as they show how the audit plan breaks down across different areas of risk that the council faces, and also how this compares to last year's internal audit plan. We've provided some definitions around each of these different assurance areas and how they link to the corporate risk register as well, which you'll find at section 5.3 of the report. So overall this year, the plan we're proposing will be a slightly more even coverage of risk compared to last year's plan. So we are proposing to increase the time that we're allocating to covering governance, project management and safeguarding. There is a reduction of time on procurement and commissioning, although it will still be a very significant chunk of the plan with at least 200 days dedicated to it. And there's also a slight reduction in ICT and information governance coverage, which simply reflects the fact that we have done quite a significant amount of work, particularly on the IT side in the current and previous financial years. And so we feel that we have assurance in that area. So very happy to take any questions, also just any comments on the coverage or areas for consideration.
Thanks, Mairead. And if we try and collect together a few questions and then Mairead can answer those. So Jeff, you start.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mairead. Spoiler alert, I am going to be asking you some questions, some deep questions, I think, on one of the audit reports later on. But on that particular one, which is concerned section 106, indicates that there are areas of concern. I'm sure that some of the other internal audits that we do have areas of concern. My question really on the programme is, have you are able to provide within the programme time to go back on some of the internal audits where further work needs to be done, or to correct some of the systems or procedures? And in particular, I'm sure that this committee will want to hear that work is being done to make those corrections. Now, whether it should come from the service departments directly or through internal audit, I don't know. But I would have thought that we come back through yourselves, the internal audit department, to update us on progress on some of those system corrections. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? David?
Just a point of explanation, please. On your contract reviews, you've got 112 days totaled. But in the dialogue added value, you mentioned 160 days that is committed. Could you explain that for me, please?
And if I can just throw in a couple of questions, Mairead, then you can try and answer all of those. The first one is, I think the total comes to something like 1,750 days, which is the same as previous years. In this year just finished, you included using an external company to fill in for vacancies. I think last time you said you wouldn't need to do that this time round. So are you confident that you can actually deliver all of this lot with the resources that you have available, taking account of sickness and training and all the rest of it? And then my second one concerns cyber crime and ICT. I know you've done an awful lot of work on this, and we have heard in previous meetings about some of the actions now being finally completed. But at Strategy, Resources and Performance, a number of members expressed concern about cybercrime. And I just wonder whether or not there is more that needs to be done by internal audit to keep an eye on what is going on. So that's sort of an open-ended question for either you or Emma or Michael, potentially. Anyway, do you want to answer some of those questions, and we'll see how we go?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, absolutely. So the first question is around providing time to go back on the findings of some of our audits that we've completed this year. So the answer to that is yes, absolutely. So first up, we have our follow-ups process. So where we agree actions that come out of an internal audit, where those are at a medium risk or higher, when the service comes to us and say, we've completed that action, internal audit won't mark that as complete until we have completed testing to demonstrate that the action has indeed been completed. So in the first instance, for every audit, we have that baseline follow-ups process where we look at the individual actions that have been completed, and we provide assurance that when a service says that they've completed the action, that it has been completed, and it has been completed to the standard kind of required by the audit in order to address the risk that was identified by the audit. Then secondly, we also include audits within the plan where we know that we need to go back and take another look at an area. They will not always be the exact same audit. So a good example from this year's plan is that in the current financial year, 23-24, we have completed a review of the new project management framework for revenue and change type projects. And we have also completed an audit looking at the project management for capital audits within the project delivery service in place and economy. So what we have in the plan for 24-25 is not only will we be following up on the implementation of the individual actions from those audits, we also have time in the plan to select a sample of revenue projects and a sample of capital projects and assess those projects for compliance with the frameworks that are in place. So we kind of have a two-pronged approach, and it really depends on the findings from the audit and the nature of those findings as to when we follow up and how soon we follow up. So equally, for some actions which may take longer to implement, we may be looking at putting follow-up audits in, perhaps for the 2025-26 financial year. But it's certainly something that is a major consideration when we are looking at the internal audit plan. If we see an audit that has a double limited assurance opinion, then I would normally be looking to complete a full follow-up review of that area within the next year's plan, unless there's a good reason to defer it slightly further back. The second question was around procurement and commissioning reviews. It is a slightly confusing presentation. So we have the first block of audits that you'll see within your pack are the core audit plan. So that's table 3 on page 52. And if you scroll down through the core audit plan, you will see that there is at the bottom of page 54, a total of 40 days within the core plan for procurement and commissioning audit work. Those reviews cover procurement compliance audit, which we conduct every year, and that takes kind of a random cross section of contracts at all different values across the organisation and looks at how compliant those are with our contract procedure rules. And then also a procurement governance audit, which focuses more on the policies and procedures that we have in place that are held by our central procurement team. So that's 40 days within the core plan. Those audits are usually completed every year because we think that is a core risk that we will always need to be providing assurance over. Then when you scroll down to table 4 on page 56, you will see our flexible internal audit plan. And within that plan, we have a number of further audits, which also provide us assurance over procurement and commissioning. So for instance, on page 57, we're including audits of the highways contract, the waste PFI. So the total of all of the core plan and the flexible plan audits, which relate to procurement and commissioning, is 160 days. So hopefully that answers that question. Next question was around the delivery of the plan. So I am reasonably optimistic that we can deliver the 1750 days. We need to recruit another principal auditor, and we are looking to recruit a part-time risk manager as well, which will just help us spread the work across the team kind of in a more helpful way, I think, and manage the risk management work slightly more separately from the main audit plan. However, the key thing to note is we do have our co-source partner contract still in place. It is a contract which we procured to last for 2 years. So if we were unable to recruit to that post, we would be able to use that contract to obtain additional external resource to support the plan. So that's quite important to note. And then finally, around cybercrime and ICT, yes, we've completed a review of focused specifically on IT security in the current financial year. We do have an audit of IT and digital strategy and service planning, which is planned currently for Q3 24-25. And the intention is that that review would look at the service following the decoupling from Peterborough and focus on how we obtain assurance over our kind of second line of defense type controls within IT. So particularly looking at things like cyber and data security, disaster recovery, and customer services. And so we would provide some further coverage of that through that audit, as well as following up when the actions from the 23-24 cybersecurity audit come due. We will also follow up on the implementation of those actions. Thanks. I'm hoping that was all the questions.
That was very, very comprehensive. We did very well to remember them all. Jeff, David, that answer your questions? Yeah, thank you. And just picking up on the cyber security bit, I think there's only 20 days identified for that audit in Q3. The question that SR&P would ask is that sufficient, bearing in mind all the risks that we are facing as a local authority at the moment?
I think we would normally consider 20 days as a reasonable sort of start point for an audit of this nature. As with any audit, there's always the possibility that as the work progresses, you identify issues, concerns, or complexity that requires further work. And if that was the case, then we would increase the budget and we would reflect that in our reporting to this committee if we needed to do that.
Okay. Well, let's just note what you say. I'm not sure whether I'm necessarily convinced, but we'll see how things go. Chris.
This is a very dangerous subject to say anything in detail about in public session, so I'm not going to go into any detail. But the level of risk which local government generally, in fact, all government, all businesses, but local government especially, is facing is very significant indeed, both from ransomware and from actors, very often state actors, who have malicious intent towards us. We will be having an informal session after the next meeting of the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee, specifically to talk about this in a private session. And I think it's quite useful, Chair, for that to be recorded in this committee, because Lucy did say that any member would be welcome to attend, and there may be members from this committee who have particular interest in the subject of cybersecurity who would be able to contribute towards that discussion when it takes place. And I think they would be very welcome to do so as well, because the more attention we pay to this, the better. There is absolutely no doubt that the public sector is significantly behind the private sector generally in the amount of attention and resource which is put into cybersecurity. And without wanting to go into detail, I think, in fact, I think we were given too much detail at Strategy, Resources and Performance about some of the weaknesses we've got. Those are a matter of public record. But I think that given the weaknesses that we saw and the weaknesses that have been in the past, I think we've got quite a few quite serious questions that we would like answering. And I don't know if Mairead was planning to be part of that meeting at Strategy, Resources and Performance, but it may be an idea at the very least for her to listen in, if not to participate in that. Thank you.
No, I agree. You might want to come back on that, Mairead, but Michael's got a comment.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I was actually going to raise it in an item that's coming up because we covered the same thing. Just to reiterate, as Councillor Bowden said, that briefing will happen, and we did agree to extend it to this committee as well. I know a number of committee members sit on both, so we will be doing that as well as further briefings on this matter to staff as well. So there'll be a number of areas, and of course, Mairead, as head of internal audit, is more than welcome in terms of that session, and we'll work with Mairead around the risk register as well on this issue.
Thank you, Alison.
Just really following up on that, I know that it's an area of, extreme concern, both in private companies and also within local authorities, national governments, and so forth. I see that this is not scheduled until Q3. Is it one of those areas where it is actually so serious that we should be thinking about trying to get this work or started at least much earlier in the year rather than waiting effectively another year?
Michael.
Yes, thank you again through you, Chair. It's I completely understand Councillor Whelan's point. The point that's made earlier up in that same table is at the moment we are decoupling from Peterborough, and that consultation will start shortly, and we will be working through that process with the officers, as well as a number of and echoing Councillor Bowden's comments, a number of developments in the area. Then it's right and proper that I think Q3 is the right timing for this. Certainly some of the discussions we had with internal audit, because again, some of the developments will answer some of the issues that if they were raised now and from previous audits. That case, and also in terms of the capacity of the team with all the other issues in terms of decoupling.
Okay, Mairead, is there anything you want to add to any of this?
I think the only thing I would, oh, sorry, I can hear my voice coming back at me over the microphones. I think the only thing I would add is that we did have a really comprehensive IT security audit undertaken in 2023. We commissioned it as a specialist IT audit, so it wasn't undertaken by my team, but we had some more technical specialists come in to undertake that review, which identified a number of actions, and we are continuing to follow up on the implementation of those actions. So it's not the case that this is an area that we don't currently have coverage of and that we're not currently tracking the implementation of actions. It is something that we are continuing to look at based on the findings of the previous audit, and we are obtaining assurance from the work that our colleagues in IT are undertaking in order to get those actions complete as well.
Okay, thank you. And Sarah, can I put you on the spot again? Having seen the paper about the internal audit plan, does that all make sense to you from a KPMG point of view? I think that means he's probably not here. I might have to ask her later. So a question for either Mairead or somebody else. We're asked to note and comment on the report, which we have done. Who actually approves your plan?
Yes, it looks very comprehensive. And I mean, I think as
sorry, go ahead,
I'm
Sarah.
sure you'll be aware, we can't directly rely on the work of internal audit, but it.
No, I accept you can't rely on it. I'm just asking your professional opinion as an external auditor as to whether or not, having seen this, it all makes sense. And also, of course, you won't know what they've looked at previously to know whether it covers comprehensively all of the council's activities. Okay, so just going back to my other question, Mairead or Michael or Emma, who approves your annual audit plan? if we're here to note and comment on it, which we have done, who approves it?
So it doesn't have a final approval. It is a ongoing piece of work which evolves throughout the year and is presented to this committee as the effectively the board under public sector internal audit standards for their input, but not their direction as to what the plan must contain, which is why we refrain from using the phrase approve when we bring it to you.
Okay. Emma, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think Mairead's done a great job of explaining it, and also the audit plan is subject to change throughout the year as well, so that it enables that to be taken into account. But the audit committee are asked to note the report and kept up to date with any changes to it.
Okay. Well, we're happy to note it. We're happy to, and we have commented on it, and we've added our 2 penneth on various aspects, particularly about the cyber issues. Right, I think we'll move on then to the next item, which is the annual whistleblowing report. And Mairead, would you like to present the report again, please?
Thank you. So this is our annual report on the implementation of the Council's whistleblowing policy. It includes an update on the outcomes of our annual staff survey on whistleblowing at section 3, which generally shows a pretty good awareness of and confidence in the Council's whistleblowing process. We've also provided an update on our annual awareness campaign among staff at section 3.2, as well as an overview and a breakdown of the numbers of whistleblowing cases we have coming in, the nature of those cases, and the outcomes of dealing with them at section 3.3. Probably the key thing for this committee to note from that section is that we are seeing an increase in the number of cases that are coming through via our corporate whistleblowing route over time. Probably the key thing to draw your attention to is section 4 of this report, which outlines our participation in the whistleblowing benchmark exercise, which is run by Protect, the whistleblowing charity. We had quite a positive outcome from completing this benchmark, which shows a comparable score against other local and central government organisations who have also completed the benchmark exercise. But it has flagged some areas that we can improve. So we've developed an action plan, which is set out at section 3.4.6 of the report. Normally, we would bring you the whistleblowing policy to reapprove alongside the annual whistleblowing report. But given there are some areas that we would like to update that policy in light of the report that we've received from Protect, and given that that was received very shortly before the deadline for papers for this committee, we'll be bringing that to you, I think, in July. So yes, for this committee's awareness, I'm happy to take any questions.
Oops. Jeff and then Chris.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Well, just to make what's probably an obvious observation, really. Whilst our we are doing as well as the benchmark KPIs for whistleblowing, it would be much nicer to see the whistleblowing numbers come down and not have the problem that they're whistleblowing on in the first place. I presume the necessary actions are being taken to stop, whether it's theft or whatever the other issues are. But I don't know, maybe you can never prevent them. I don't know. But it's just I find that that's quite a strange KPI. That's all.
Chris,
I'd like
Mairead, again, we'll get a couple of questions.
I'd like fundamentally to disagree with what Jeff said. And the figure I look at, which I think is relevant here and relevant to the point that Jeff was making, are the number of actions where the outcome was, where the number of whistleblowing cases where the outcome was that no action was required. And that's a relatively low figure. It was 5 in this in 22-23. So action was required of one form or another. In many cases. Now, in some cases, we just couldn't investigate at all. There were 2 of those. But in many other cases, even if it's only informal, there was action which was taken as a result of the whistleblowing. And if we were to see a significant proportion of the whistleblowing cases were ones where no action was required, then I'd begin to become worried. But I think it's actually a sign of a healthy ecosystem that we've got here in terms of our ethos, that people feel confident enough to whistleblow. And I'm particularly pleased, I have to say, although I fully agree we'd prefer the numbers to be zero, that 3 of the whistleblowing items in 22-23 ended up in police referral and being taken to court. And I personally read through this and I was very impressed by the level of assurance that most employees seem to have so far as the whistleblowing process is concerned. Even if they didn't really know what it was, they still seem to be confident in it, which I thought was interesting. So I don't take the same view of Jeff. Yes, of course, it'd be much better if nothing ever went wrong and there was never any need to whistleblow at all. But the larger an organization is, the more it's necessary to have a system like this for when things do go wrong, to make sure that they're able to be put right in an easier way. So all in all, I thought this was very good. And I just wonder, Chair, if as part of our engagement with staff, this whole report, I think, should be sent to all members of staff so that they can see for themselves that whistleblowing is taken seriously. There are consequences where there need to be consequences. I thought this report is the sort of thing which, if it was sent to all members of staff, would give even greater confidence to members of staff that the whistleblowing process really works.
Okay, well, have a think about that, Mairead and Emma, but Nick's got a question as well.
Well, not so much of a question, just an observation that, like Chris, I think this looks really very good, especially considering the problems that we have had over the last few years, which revealed at that time that whistleblowing policy was really not fit for purpose. So we've clearly turned this around now, and it also looks like the seriousness of most of these is not huge as well. So yeah, I'm very pleased to see this.
And oh, sorry, Alison.
Yeah, I'd like to sort of endorse really what both of our previous people have actually just said. Reality is that those of us who have been faced with situations where we need to whistleblow, it is actually can be an extremely scary thing to do, because in many organizations, it is the end of your career in that organization if you whistleblow. Seeing this information like this, and again, I do have to disagree with Jeff on this. I actually think it's really good to see the increased number of items that are being reported. The only thing I think in this report that bothered me at all was to see that the lack of awareness going up a little bit, and it would be nice for that to be addressed. I think that does need to be addressed. I think helping to address that by circulating, potentially an edited version of what's in this to all staff would be really helpful. They can see then that, their actions are actually resulting in something, and, those who've actually done something will understand that it isn't impacting them. And that really would be beneficial, I think, from both sides of this.
Okay, thank you. No. Well, you can say something quickly.
Very quickly. All right. Of course, I don't disagree with what everybody has said. I know how important it is. Of course, I do. But it was just the KPI that's on 344. If we have a lot more than everybody else, does that mean we're doing well? I don't think it does. I just found it a very difficult, or perhaps not a very meaningful KPI. But of course, I totally agree with everybody that this is a system that should be, we should be proud of, and that we do allow that whistleblowing to take place. So whatever I said,
right, I take back. Thank you, Jeff. And if I can just double check, presumably when you've done all the different actions that are described on page 69, you will go back and redo the benchmarking exercise to see how things have changed, how hopefully improved. Is that correct? Because it's not I didn't see it specifically described. So a few questions there, but the main one was, how do we advise staff about this policy and the benefits of whistleblowing, either through sending out this whole report or an edited version of it or something similar? So Mairead or Emma?
Thank you. I think the key thing that I would note to this committee is our second action within the action plan, which is about, third action, which is about delivering a whistleblowing e-learning and designating this as essential learning for all staff. So that is an action that we are working on. Firstly, hopefully that will ensure that all staff are aware of the whistleblowing policy, the basics around whistleblowing. But then also secondly, I mean, my intention in terms of what we include within that policy would be to include some content around the outcomes from whistleblowing referrals, around, the kinds of allegations that we see. And so I would see some of the contents of this report being included within that training. And I think that would be a very effective way, hopefully, for staff to raise their awareness about the existence of a whistleblowing policy, but also to give them that assurance that if they do raise a whistleblowing concern, it will be dealt with seriously, professionally, and that they will be protected as whistleblowers as well.
Emma, do you want to add anything to that?
Sorry about that, Chair. Yeah, just to really support Mairead and what the committee is saying, obviously we want to create a culture where it's seen as, people know how to raise a whistleblowing concern and then raise them. They also gain confidence from knowing that things are properly dealt with. So even if there is nothing there, the fact that Mairead will, and when we investigate, we go back to the whistleblower to say what we've done and why we've done it, what the outcome is, can demonstrate we're dealing with things in a transparent way. And lots of the cases, there isn't anything there that is sinister, but we can always learn from things that we can change practice so that even if things are fine, it's really important that the appearance of things should be okay. So if there's learning to be done there, it's important that we do that as well. And I think it is really positive around our culture that we're doing this. We have the same conversation around data protection breaches. We'd much rather know about them and have them reported in and be able to look at them than people not know how to do it or not have the confidence that if they do report it, then we're going to look at it appropriately. So I think that what the committee is saying is really important there, and certainly the points they've picked up in relation to making it more widespread, widely known amongst staff and raising the confidence is critical as well. And we can do some stuff around Friday Focus as well when we launch this, when we've done the work on it as well. So I think that will build confidence with our staff and with the public as well, because obviously it's important to reflect that we get referrals from the public as well. They need to be assured of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Emma and Mairead. I think we're very happy with that proposal, that we include the details of the work done today in e-learning, and then as you redo the audit, we'll be redoing the benchmarking to see how things have changed. All right, thank you very much. So we have noted the report. The next item is the corporate risk register. And can I ask Mairead to introduce the report, please? This is the same report that went to strategy, resources and performance earlier this week. Mairead.
Thank you, Chair. So this is our regular update on the Council's corporate risk register and on corporate risk management activity. The updated corporate risk register is presented as Appendix 1 to the report, with all corporate risks having been reviewed and updated by their risk owners during February. Within the risk register, you'll see a visualization of the score for each individual risk in the top left-hand corner, with the X showing the residual risk score and the RA showing the council's maximum risk appetite, which is 15. So within the report itself, Table 1 gives a high-level overview of the corporate risks, and you'll see that all of the residual risk scores have remained static since our previous update on the corporate risk register. And in the current report, we are using a red, amber, green rating to show the direction of travel for each risk, with amber denoting no change in the score. One of the comments from Strategy, Resources and Performance was that they would be interested in doing a session looking at the presentation of the corporate risk register and looking at how we consider direction of travel for risk scores as well. So that may be something that both committees want to collaborate on. We've also brought some other updates on risk management, and particularly the work of the CLT Risk and Assurance Group, which met on the 1st of March. In particular, that involved reviewing the way that directorate risk registers are reported to committee. And we've developed some new proposals around this, which are set out at section 4.1.2, as well as a further review of weighted risk matrices. And then finally, we also bring an update on the implementation of key actions within the corporate risk strategy at section 4.1. And there'll be a review and refresh of the risk strategy in our report to this committee in July, I believe. So happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mairead. Just to remind folk about our role being to consider the effectiveness of the risk management arrangements and associated control environment, and to seek assurances that appropriate action is being taken in response to risk, which I think we can be assured it is. Yeah, no comments. I don't think we've got any comments or questions, Mairead. Chris and I made various suggestions, comments at the SR&P meeting, and it'd be good to have that session and invite other people along. I think people from audit and accounts might well be interested in joining as well. Excellent, thank you very much. So we have noted the corporate risk register. We now move on to the update on audit and accounts committee review of effectiveness action plan. Mairead, would you care to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. Just a brief introduction for this report. It is an update on the implementation of the action plan agreed in response to the Audit and Accounts Committee review of effectiveness, which took place in September 2023. So Section 3 simply shows the actions that we've completed and outlines the timeline for completion for the remaining actions. The other thing that the committee may wish to consider is whether it wishes to repeat that review of effectiveness perhaps in September this year to follow up on progress, but we can continue to update on completion over time.
Okay, thank you. So any comments, or while you're thinking, two from me. One, is there any way of you knowing how many of us have looked at the Microsoft Teams site that you've kindly set up, on which has got loads and loads of reports? I'm not going to name and shame because I have no idea, but I wonder how many of us have actually looked at these various reports that you've put on. I
can't tell, I'm afraid, Chair.
Oh, right. Okay. I know Jeff's looked at the Section 106 report in some detail, but I don't know about the other ones. And then the second one is the feedback exercise, inviting feedback on our performance from Chief Executive Monitoring Officer, Section 15 Officer, and key councillor stakeholders. So far, you've only had one response. I'm just wondering when you're planning to do the next rerun, because clearly we don't want to get caught up with the same busy time of year that the business planning budget setting around this that we got caught about this year. So do you have a date for that?
Thank you, Chair. I think we were discussing that we may be able to undertake this in person at a meeting of Statutory Officers Group. So I'd need to liaise with them to identify a specific date. But I would probably suggest that we look at completing that over the summer, and then that would tie in well with a subsequent review of effectiveness in September 2024, if the committee desired.
That would be fine. But I think it's also important to get views of the councillor, the leaders of the various groups as well, the council group, so they won't be caught up by the statutory officers, but that you'll need to find a way of identifying them separately. Okay, no other comments from anybody? Sorry, Emma.
Thank you very much, Jeff. It helps. I administer the agenda for the Statutory Officers Group, so we can have it on for the next meeting, Mairead, on the 22nd of April. And I also meet with the group leaders on a monthly basis to discuss the governance issues. So I'm quite happy to undertake to do the review of effectiveness with them at one of those meetings.
That would be excellent, thank you. And then we were intending to have a session with the external auditor and Mairead today, face to face, but because both Mairead and Sarah are, well, we invited Sarah to stay online, are joining us remotely, we're going to postpone that to our May meeting. So I hope that's okay, Sarah, and if you've had similar sessions with other people, other local authorities or clients, then don't be afraid to tell us what questions we should be asking you rather than us answer our questions. Okay, thank you very much. So we have noted the progress on the review of effectiveness action plan. The next item is the internal audit progress report. Again, can I ask Mairead to introduce the report, please? Mairead.
Thank you, Chair. So this is our regular internal audit progress report summarising progress with the internal audit plan to the 28th of February. So I'll run you through a few key things to note. As usual, at section 7 of the report, we include an update on outstanding agreed audit actions. We currently have 80 actions which are overdue for implementation, which is slightly down from our previous report to this committee, where there were 85. We also, just to note, have quite a significant number of actions due for implementation in March and April. So optimistic that we should see a further reduction in our next report. And I've also highlighted some groups of actions where there's a single common blocker or dependency. So, for instance, there have been 5 actions which are awaiting the meeting of the new Information Management Board. So optimistic that we will see those numbers coming down. As requested by this committee, we are now showing revisions to target implementation dates over time in Annex B, and additionally highlighting actions overdue by a year plus within the main table of this report. There are 12 actions which fall into that category, all of which are medium rated. So we have no high or essentials that fall into the over a year category. Also, to note that the report includes a summary of the outcomes of our annual self-assessment against public sector internal audit standards, which was completed by our new Deputy Head of Internal Audit as one of the first things she did on joining our team, which gives us a slightly more refreshed and independent take on the self-assessment. That confirmed no significant concerns around compliance with those standards. We have outlined some actions for further development in 2024-25, which we will be incorporating into the team's quality assurance and improvement plan. And it is also just worth this committee being aware that there are new global internal audit standards which have been released. We are currently waiting to hear the impact that will have on the UK public sector standards. So we await further news from the standard setters, and we will continue to provide this committee with updates on that and what those new standards will mean for the team, any work we'll have to do to ensure that we're compliant with the new public sector standards. And then the final thing, just to draw your attention to, is that unfortunately, the internal audit team at West Northamptonshire have said they are not going to be able to complete the 2023-24 debt recovery audit as planned due to resourcing issues. Because the Cambridgeshire team have completed the debt recovery audit several times previously, we have offered to pick that work up and complete it. However, we will not be starting work on that until early April. So we cannot absolutely guarantee that that debt recovery audit will be completed in time for the annual head of audit opinion, although clearly we will endeavour to ensure that's the case where possible. And I will at least be aware of the progress with fieldwork to that date. So those were the areas that I wanted to highlight, but as ever, happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. I think there's various questions, Chris first and then Jeff. But first of all, it's really good to see that even in your internal review, you've come out well as a team on your various internal audit practices. So I think we, as a committee, we're pleased with that and would wish to note that. On the other hand, it's disappointing that West Northants again cannot deliver something that they had previously promised to do. And it's good that you're able to pick it up because of your knowledge and on the subject. So that's helpful. Right, I have some other questions, but let's see what others have to say. Chris.
Thank you, Graham. The first thing I think we need to recognise, and it's really important, is that there are no essential recommendations which are outstanding. And it's easy for us now to just take that for granted. It's not always been able to be taken for granted in the past. It still can't be taken for granted, but it is a fact that there aren't any essential recommendations outstanding, which is important. There are high recommendations outstanding and outstanding for some considerable time, and obviously that is of some concern. I'm not going to talk about any individual one particularly today, although I'll pick one just as an example. But I'm really grateful that officers have really thoroughly done what I requested at the last meeting and have put all the different target dates we've had for various things, because it does tell a story. And I think this is something maybe the senior management team should be looking at. I'll give one example on the government procurement cards for schools, where the recommendation was that clear guidance needed to be given to schools on the use of government procurement cards. And that original target date was given for that was on the 1st of August last year. In September, it was extended to the 30th of September, end of the month. In December, it was extended to the 31st of December, again, the end of the month. In January, they were a little bit less optimistic. They extended it to 31st of March. But now we see it extended again to the 30th of June. And we can see this pattern occurring on quite a number, even of the high recommendations which exist. Now, sometimes this will be for reasons which have just been given by Mairead. Sometimes there can be codependencies which stop something from progressing. But my concern generally, and I don't want to pick just on the GPC, but my concern is that these target dates may not be realistic when they're being set. There's a pattern here which just concerns me a bit. And I would appreciate it, I think, if the senior management team were to look at that and consider, is something going wrong with this targeting? Thank you.
Michael, do you want to answer that first?
I totally agree with what Councillor Bowden's just said, and we have recognised that. There are others in there. I'll just pick on one as another example. For example, insurance in my own area, which was set to a date that was unachievable based on the fact that our former head of insurance was leaving and there was a gap, and so I think there's a need for officers to recognise that in agreeing to the actions, they need to recognise that we are following up, and I think that is now something that we're seeing in the right direction of travel within each of the directorates. that they're aware that they'll be held accountable to that, and that therefore in setting and agreeing to the action and the date, they're able to deliver that. And I think that's what we're now seeing in terms of more discussion between the auditors and more recognition, but also prioritization where it is essential that it's being met. So there will be times where there are competing resources, internal audit action competing with a business as usual action. And that's where these are now being brought up at a directorate and CLT level to have that discussion of, well, actually, that still needs to be done, so what needs to be reprioritized. So I think we'll see this direction of travel hopefully continue to move. And it's one of the things we've been pushing back to. There's been a lot of dates that were agreed 12 months ago without any thought that they would be, followed up, or that was the date. I think that culture now is changing, and the proof of the pudding will be in the next report and the report after that.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to try and be brief, but I may not be so brief on this occasion. First of all, thank you, Merid, for producing this report. A very good report indeed, very revealing and very worrying. But it has been a long time coming. Now, I've had an interest in this report, and I'll just give you the briefest of background without being too specific. But when I first was elected last year, I went out with colleagues, including some previous former county councillors, looking at a road scheme, a speeding scheme. And one of the councillors, former councillors, said, I think there's still some money due on Section 106 to cover this. And he was thinking back many years, 5, 6 years. And he said, we've always asked about it, but we never got an answer to it. But I'm sure it's there. I'm not going to go into the details on that, but I raised the query with finance. And this is not just about money. Section 106 is not just about money. Section 106 is about the projects that have been identified, community projects that obviously service departments want to see progressed. And there was a bit of backwards and forwards anyway, without going into details. Not only was the money that I thought was due, but there was a lot more uncollected. And that is being pursued as we speak. It's not an inconsequential sum of money, as I say. And I believe that there are other cases. So whilst, Merid, you have beautifully summarized, very diplomatically summarized the report in Section 4, and I have a whole report here. I do recommend that colleagues read this report because it is, as I say, very revealing. Systems are limited and they will need a lot of work to correct. Compliance has been designated as moderate. I'm not quite sure about that because there's quite a lot of things that have not been complied with. And as a result, I think that monies that are due have not been collected. And I think that there's money that has been collected. In fact, I know that there are money that has been collected that has not been spent on the projects that they were originally designated for, and is at risk of being returned to the developers. And there's a whole raft of other things that we know that should have happened that didn't happen. I'm going to include amongst that getting security on financial contributions. It certainly wasn't there in the case, as it should have been, in the case that I've been involved in. I think the report raises a lot more questions than it answers. And what I want to ask this committee, and I'm not sure how we go about this, is that I think it does need a deep dive. We don't have, it's very short on figures. There is an overall figure for the amounts of funds that the the county is holding, which are possibly due to be spent on particular projects. But I've only got the total figure, and that is certainly not inconsequential. And I'd like to know what is at risk there. And I'd also like assurance by seeing what Section 106 monies were due in, that it had, you know, everything that was due, say over the last 5-10 years or whatever, has actually been collected and used for the purposes for which it was originally intended. So, you know, quite a lot of questions to be answered, I think. Not by internal audit. You've done a great job. You've identified exactly what, you know, our vulnerabilities were, and I think that they do need to be corrected. I have had a meeting with the service departments who are involved in some of this. I'm satisfied that they know exactly what they have to do to put systems back into shape. But I think it's a matter of concern. I think it's a matter of risk. And I think that this committee needs to know that all the recommendations, plus the assurance of where we are today, that we can, the monies that we hold are not at risk, or we can identify what is at risk, and whether there is other funds to be collected, can be collected, and whether we've perhaps waived the right to collect some of those contributions. This report quite correctly doesn't deal with the non-financial contributions, but one worries also whether they have also been fulfilled by the developers. We did not have an effective system for monitoring the trigger points, for example. So I think it's quite a serious failing on the part of the council as a whole. I could comment more, but I think you probably heard more than enough from me.
Thanks, Jeff. Let's let Michael comment.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. The work was actually commissioned by myself and Frank Jordan, the Exec Director for Place and Sustainability, on the back of the matter that Councillor Seif refers to there. So yes, it is a very good report and a very good read. I've spoken with the officer concerned, and thank you for acknowledging the briefing regarding the action plan there. And David actually is keen to do a member briefing, because it is a complex area. I've worked at a number of authorities, and certainly my last two, this was a significant issue. And what we haven't flagged here is the impact also, because Section 106 is applied across the district for the same type of scheme. There are duality of responsibilities there, so that complicates the matter even further. And I think what it also shows is the need to include that in the integrated financial monitoring report in terms of the updates related to that. It won't be the same as a kind of budget monitoring, because some of these are speculative and some of these are triggered later on down the line. So it is slightly more complicated in terms of its reporting and untwining what actually the movements mean across the period. But I think that's where I want to put the focus in terms of that openness and transparency, because I will relay to members that in one of my former authorities, so they're not identified, I had to write off £8 million worth of Section 106s. We cannot afford to do that. We do not want to afford that. So that's the action that we're looking to take. So both a briefing, but also reporting through the IFMR.
Thank you. Is there a service committee that should be looking into this in more detail, or are you happy that it comes back here? That because Jeff is asking for a lot more detail and a deep dive, which I think makes eminent sense because of the significance of this. But is there a service committee like Assets and Procurement that it should be passed over to, and they look at it rather than us?
So what's fascinating about Section 106 is it's typically for education, highways, library developments, public land, which therefore cuts across 4 committees. So actually there's a need to include it within the capital reporting, but then overall to the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee, I believe, as the oversight committee. So we will report through on what's happening on the education 106s. to children and young people, and on highways to the highways committee, and so on. And I think there is the opportunity there through those committees, because clearly what they're linked to is developments, investment flowing from developments in areas of recognised need, be that a new school, a new GPs, a playground, etc. The list goes on. So they will be linked into that strategic direction of those various committees, and then the oversight of the overall funding through strategy, resources, and performance.
Okay, Jeff, final point.
I think you just picked up what I wanted to ask, which is, can we do that? Can we commission that? Can we initiate that? Can we get that information? Because I really think it's important. So, I mean, there would be quite a bit of work, given that we don't have the systems to collate all the information that I've just asked for. So the unspent Section 106 funds and the amounts due and the amounts that have been collected, including amounts actually collected on our behalf by local authorities and possibly not passed back to us yet. I look to my colleague over here who seems to, I think, knows something about that. But anyway, that's but it's the information, I think, that needs to come back to this committee. Yeah.
So I think it will be an evolving picture for some of the reasons that Councillor Seif alluded to earlier, in terms of our data capture and evolving of that data, and obviously some of the complexities of reporting. You can have a 106 balance of £2 million that the next month is £4 million because we've hit a trigger, and it's the recognition of those triggers. So I think it will be an evolving of what we report, but I recommend that it's reported to the appropriate service committee, which may cut across two for the same scheme. Could be a bit of highways investment and education, but the overall then overarching review of 106 is coming back to strategy, resources, and performance. Clearly, the follow-up actions to the internal audit report will be picked up through the head of internal audit to see that actually these are being actioned.
Okay, so and I think strategy, resources, and performance will do the deep dive and the detailed assessment. We need to make sure that it's included within our action notes. That's what our expectation is, and I'll contact Lucy, and Michael will be in touch as well, I'm sure, to make sure it's on their agenda and they're looking out for it. Any other comments from anybody? No. Okay, so we have noted the report, the internal audit progress report, and made some comments, particularly about Section 106 and progressing the audit recommendations on that. The final item is the committee agenda plan. And can I ask Dawn to provide any updates to our agenda plan on page 183?
The only one I picked up during the meeting was Mairead mentioned the whistleblowing policy going to the July meeting, so I'll add that to the agenda plan.
Okay, anything from anybody else, Chris?
May I just confirm, because the date is in brackets, I don't know if I'm misunderstanding this. Our next meeting is on the 30th of May rather than 21st of May. I'm not quite sure what the meaning is of the date in brackets underneath the date.
That's the date that officers have to get their reports in.
Basically, yes, yeah. Sorry about that.
It's a reminder to them to make sure that they do their stuff in plenty of time, to give Dawn 7 days to publish the papers and send them out to us. Any other comments from anybody? No? Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Sarah, for watching on the screen, and for Emma and Mairead for joining us as well. That concludes today's meeting, and the next one is on Thursday, the 30th of May. Thank you. Bye-bye.